Apparently, when the government says your money at work, they mean performance art in fiscal confusion. 1. The shrimp on a treadmill experiment. In 2011, taxpayers discovered they'd helped fund a scientific masterpiece, a treadmill for shrimp. The study's goal was to understand how crustaceans respond to exercise under different water conditions. It cost thousands, complete with a tiny aquatic gym setup that would make any seafood proud. Scientists claimed it was important for marine biology, but Americans mostly wondered why their paycheck deductions were financing seafood cardio. The best part? The shrimp actually quit halfway through. Even the shrimp were like, "You're not paying me enough for this." 2. $120,000 jazz for cows. In Vermont, the government decided that cows were too stressed and needed help relaxing. Their solution? A $120,000 grant to study how jazz music affects milk production. Researchers piped Miles Davis into barns across the state. The result? The cows didn't care. Milk output didn't change, but at least we proved that not even a trumpet solo can make a Holstein groove. Somewhere, a farmer just turned off the radio and said, "You could have just asked." 3. A $2 million airport for no one in Montana. A full-sized airport was built in the middle of nowhere, with a terminal, runway, and 0 passengers. It was supposed to stimulate local growth. Instead, it stimulated tumbleweeds. The annual maintenance still costs hundreds of thousands in taxpayer money, mostly to keep birds from nesting in the empty hangar. Locals nicknamed it Airstrip 404, destination not found. Honestly, it's the perfect metaphor for government spending. Big, expensive, and waiting for a purpose that never arrived. 4. The $3 million Turtle Tunnel, Florida proudly built an underground tunnel system. Not for cars, not even for people, but for turtles. The Turtle Underpass cost nearly $3 million and was meant to prevent roadkill. It worked for about 6 turtles, maybe 7 on a good day. Meanwhile, nearby schools had leaky roofs and outdated textbooks. Priorities were clear. The turtles were getting express service, and the kids were still stuck in traffic. 5. The $750,000 pizza redesign project. In 2012, the U.S. Department of Commerce spent $750,000 to help pizzerias develop more efficient pizza boxes and toppings. They called it Innovation in Small Business. What they actually created was a government-funded focus group debating the aerodynamics of pepperoni. The final report concluded that customers like round pizzas on flat boxes, truly groundbreaking work. NASA's engineers wept with jealousy. 6. $1 million to teach monkeys. How to gamble somewhere in North Carolina. Government-funded researchers decided the best use of taxpayer money was to teach monkeys the psychological thrill of slot machines. The study's goal? To understand human addiction patterns. The result? A room full of hyperactive primates frantically pressing buttons for banana pellets. After several months, the scientists concluded that, yes, creatures like rewards. Groundbreaking. The monkeys didn't quit, though. They got addicted. So congratulations, your tax dollars created a casino for monkeys that was somehow less ethical and more profitable than Vegas. 7. $500,000 to study why people love Facebook cats. In 2016, the National Science Foundation dropped $500,000 to analyze why people share cute cat videos online. They called it a digital empathy study. They could have just asked anyone with Wi-Fi, because cats are funny. Instead, they built focus groups, emotional surveys, and a 200-page report concluding that, brace yourself, people feel joy when animals do silly things. Somewhere, a taxpayer was screaming, "I could have told you that for free," and with better memes. Narrated, the $2.6 million toilet for astronauts. NASA spent $2.6 million designing a zero-gravity toilet for the International Space Station, which, fine, makes sense, until you realize they built 3 versions before one actually worked. The final prototype was so complicated it came with a 43-page manual and required training videos. One astronaut described it as like docking with a black hole. Meanwhile, down on Earth, people were still using porta-potties at county fairs. Space may be the final frontier, but apparently, plumbing is the real challenge. 9. The $400,000 joke machine project. In 2014, the Pentagon funded a research program to build artificial intelligence that could understand humor. The dream? a computer that tells jokes to improve military morale. What they got was an AI that responded to human stress with knock-knock jokes. After years of work, the only successful outcome was a robot that could say, "Knock knock. Who's there? Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy who? Bureaucracy will get back to you in 3 to 5 business years." Congress called it a promising start. Everyone else called it proof the robots are already making fun of us. 10. $1.2 million for luxury fish housing. In Washington state, the government spent over $1 million building a fish-friendly culvert, which turned out to be a gold-plated aquatic mansion. The project aimed to improve salmon migration, but accidentally created what one inspector described as a 5-star spa for trout. It included hand-cut stone, a water filtration system, and decorative landscaping. The salmon still swam elsewhere, possibly embarrassed. But hey, somewhere in rural Washington, there's a creek that's fancier than most people's apartments. 11. $3.9 million to study. Why golfers get mad. Because apparently, no one could have guessed. The government granted nearly $4 million to examine the psychological triggers behind golf rage. Researchers attached heart monitors to golfers and filmed them missing putts in slow motion. The official report concluded that frustration increases when golfers perform poorly. Groundbreaking, truly. Somewhere in Washington, a senator read that and said, "We paid how much to learn that people get angry when they suck at golf?" Honestly, they could have just watched a single Saturday afternoon at any municipal course and saved everyone the trouble. 12. $2.5 million to build an inflatable mouse. At a California university, scientists were awarded a multi-million-dollar grant to develop an inflatable mouse, not a cartoon toy, an actual balloon replica for studying fear response in real mice. The inflatable predator was designed to pop up dramatically and scare them. The problem? The mice figured out it wasn't real within 2 days and started using it as a playground. So yes, American taxpayers financed the world's most expensive rodent bouncy castle. Somewhere, a lab mouse is swinging on it thinking, "Nice work, nerds." 13. $1 million to study. Why squirrels run into traffic. The Department of Transportation decided to tackle a critical question. Why do squirrels dash in front of cars? The answer, they hoped, would improve road safety. After 3 years, multiple dead GoPros, and several traumatized interns, they concluded that squirrels are impulsive and indecisive. You don't say. The report even included a behavioral chart called Squirrel Hesitation Patterns, as if we were going to put up little crosswalks for them next. At least we know evolution still has a sense of humor. 14. $850,000 to track how long shrimp can run. Again. Apparently, one shrimp treadmill wasn't enough. A second round of funding extended the crustacean cardiovascular research. This time, they wanted to see how long shrimp could run after eating different diets. Spoiler, they can't. The grand conclusion was that shrimp with more oxygen swim slightly longer before they give up, which is pretty much the same result you'd get from studying anyone on a treadmill after lunch. It's comforting to know seafood and humans share at least one trait. We both stop trying after carbs. 15. $500,000 to design a robot with feelings. The Pentagon poured $500,000 into creating a robot capable of empathy. Engineers gave it big cartoon eyes and the ability to frown when spoken too harshly. It could detect tone, respond to sadness, and even offer comforting phrases. The result? The first government-funded robot therapist. Except it became too empathetic. During testing, it refused orders it considered emotionally unfair. It literally said, "That seems unkind." In the end, they turned it off for insubordination. It turns out we built a robot with feelings and immediately fired it for having them. 16. $4.2 million to study the effects of air. At a major university, researchers spent over $4 million to analyze how air quality impacts mood. Over 4 years, they gathered air samples from different states, tracked human emotions, and concluded that, brace yourself, people feel happier when the air is cleaner. It's science that could have been discovered by opening a window. They even held a conference to present the results. No one looked surprised. The final slide literally read, "Clean air makes people smile." Taxpayers, not smiling. 17. $1.1 million to study the benefits of coffee on senior golfers. This one's pure America. The government funded a seven-figure study to see if drinking coffee improved elderly golfers' performance. Researchers supplied retirees with free caffeine, golf carts, and snacks, then followed them around for months. The conclusion? Coffee makes old golfers slightly more alert and significantly more chatty. You don't say. So yes, your tax dollars went to pay scientists to hang out at country clubs and confirm what every diner waitress already knew. Caffeine helps people stay awake and complain better. 18. $300,000 to study the romantic habits of quails on cocaine. Yes, that's real. In the 1990s, a university received a federal grant to determine how cocaine affected the mating habits of Japanese quails. The goal was to understand human addiction patterns, but it basically turned into a feathery soap opera. The drugged birds became hyperactive, obsessive, and overly affectionate toward their reflections. The researchers' final note: increased intensity of mating behavior. Translation: we accidentally made bird nightclubs. It's comforting to know that while we're paying taxes, somewhere in a lab, a quail is snorting lines and dancing to Barry White. 19. $500,000 to train sea monkeys to swim in formation. In one of the most patriotic wastes of money ever, the Navy funded an experiment to see if brine shrimp could be trained to move together like a military unit. After 6 months, the conclusion was both simple and tragic. They can't. The sea monkeys ignored all stimuli, refused to cooperate, and eventually died of boredom. It's the only time in U.S. history that a group of soldiers and scientists both failed basic training at the same time. Somewhere in a Pentagon basement, there's probably still a file labeled Operation Aqua Squad. 20. $2 million for a happy marriage robot. In 2015, a grant was awarded to a university to create an AI relationship counselor capable of predicting divorce. It used voice tone, body language, and emotional algorithms to assess couples. The prototype listened to hundreds of arguments and started developing opinions. At one point, it interrupted a test couple and said, "I think you two should just break up." That's right, your tax money built a sassy robot that gives relationship advice with all the subtlety of Dr. Phil after a Red Bull. It didn't save any marriages, but it did make researchers question their own. 21. $1.7 million to study why people fear dental floss. Someone, somewhere, convinced the National Institutes of Health that America needed to understand why people don't floss. The study involved hours of interviews, anxiety tests, and focus groups with people confessing their deep emotional trauma surrounding minty string. The final result? People don't floss because it's boring, uncomfortable, and easy to lie about. That's it. 2 years, $1.7 million, and a nationwide survey to confirm what every dentist learns on day one. If there's ever a grant for why people avoid taxes, I think we already know the answer. 22. $2.9 million to develop a smart toaster. In 2019, a government innovation fund invested almost $3 million to create the world's first AI-enhanced toaster. It had Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and an app that let you choose your exact shade of brown. It could even recognize your face and greet you in the morning. Unfortunately, it didn't actually toast evenly, overheated constantly, and occasionally burned bread while loudly announcing, "Your breakfast is ready, citizen." Eventually, the project was scrapped after someone pointed out that a $15 toaster already does the job, without threatening to join Skynet. 23. $400,000 to study why hamsters run in circles. Hamsters are adorable, sure, but not $400,000 adorable. The National Science Foundation funded a multi-year project to study motivational loops in small mammals, which is government speak for why does the hamster keep running even when it's tired? The answer turned out to be because it's a hamster. It runs in circles because that's all it knows, which, come to think of it, might be the best metaphor for government spending ever recorded. 24. $1.3 million to test emotionally responsive military uniforms. The Pentagon once funded an experiment to create combat uniforms that could sense and respond to soldier emotions. The goal? Fabric that detects stress and adjusts color accordingly. The result? An expensive mood ring in camouflage form. The uniforms turned pink under anxiety and blue when calm, which, if you think about it, completely defeats the purpose of camouflage. Imagine a battlefield full of soldiers glowing like mood lamps. Even the enemy would have called a timeout just to laugh. 25. $750,000 for the barber pole study. The Department of Labor funded a project to understand the symbolic cultural impact of barber poles. The researchers toured barbershops across America, asked patrons deep philosophical questions about spinning red and white stripes, and concluded that barber poles represent trust, tradition, and community. The project's final presentation included a video montage of barbers set to "The Wind Beneath My Wings." The total cost, $750,000. The emotional takeaway: we could have funded 15,000 actual haircuts instead. 26. $1.8 million to study the social lives of drunk birds. In 2017, a team of biologists got a hefty grant to research what happens when birds get drunk on fermented berries. The government wanted to understand avian decision-making under intoxication. The result? Hours of footage showing robins flying into walls and passing out mid-air. The final paper described reduced navigational accuracy, which is science speak for "they got hammered and crashed." So, to recap, taxpayers spent nearly $2 million confirming that even birds make bad choices after a few drinks. Somewhere, a pigeon is still hungover and wondering why it's in a lab report. 27. $3.5 million to build a smart frisbee. The Department of Defense apparently decided that the regular frisbee, a perfectly functional $5 object, wasn't advanced enough. They invested millions in a tactical flying disc equipped with sensors and GPS. It was meant to be a precision data delivery system. Translation: an expensive frisbee that tattled on your throwing accuracy. During testing, it constantly malfunctioned, once landing on a colonel's lunch tray and transmitting "target neutralized." The program was quietly scrapped, and humanity returned to using normal frisbees. For free. 28. $600,000 to test if snails can learn math. A research team in California decided to see whether snails could recognize basic numerical patterns. They built tiny snail obstacle courses, timed their movements, and fed them lettuce-based rewards. After 2 years, they concluded that snails cannot, in fact, do math. They can, however, eat lettuce very slowly and ignore all instructions. The lead scientist said the findings could help us understand human learning. If by human learning they meant how to spend money at the speed of a snail, then mission accomplished. 29. $900,000 for a Museum of Invisible Art. In one of the boldest modern art experiments, the government helped fund a museum dedicated entirely to art that exists only in the imagination. Visitors entered white rooms and stared at empty pedestals while a guide described what the art would have been. The curators called it a meditation on existence. Everyone else called it a scam you can't even see. The museum eventually closed, but not before producing a 120-page catalog featuring photos of nothing, each with a price tag. Somewhere, a taxpayer is still trying to figure out if that counts as money laundering or performance art. 30. $2.4 million to teach robots. How to Feel Regret, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, funded an initiative to give robots the human ability to feel regret after making a mistake. Engineers programmed them to sigh, pause, and shake their heads when they failed tasks. It worked too well. In one demonstration, a robot dropped a wrench and said, "I have disappointed you." The audience applauded. The Pentagon, however, realized that a remorseful robot refusing to repeat errors wasn't ideal for combat, so they reprogrammed it to ignore guilt. Somewhere, there's a robot therapist still crying about that decision. 31. $1 million to study the gender politics of soap operas. A federal humanities grant funded a deep dive into decades of daytime television to analyze how soap operas shape gender norms. Researchers watched 200 episodes across 30 years. The conclusion: people watch soap operas for drama, not feminism. They found no measurable impact on real-world behavior, but did manage to spend taxpayer money on popcorn and streaming subscriptions. The report's final line? Romantic betrayal remains a strong narrative motivator. Translation: everyone cheats, no one learns, and taxpayers footed the bill for binge-watching days of our lives. 32. $4.8 million for a smart fork that tells you to slow down. The government partnered with a tech startup to create a utensil that vibrates if you eat too fast. It tracks bites, measures chewing speed, and sends you encouraging messages. The slogan was "Mindful Eating for a Healthier Nation." The reality was thousands of confused consumers with buzzing forks and spilled soup. Reviews called it a vibrating guilt machine. The company eventually folded, but not before burning through millions in funding. Somewhere, an ordinary spoon is laughing quietly from the drawer, saying, "See, I told you so." 33. $2.2 million to develop eco-friendly glitter. Environmental scientists received a multi-million-dollar grant to create biodegradable glitter that wouldn't harm marine life. A noble idea, except they spent 18 months debating what fun color palettes were considered scientifically relevant. They hired consultants, conducted focus groups, and even held glitter-throwing workshops. The final product looked identical to regular glitter, but cost roughly $400 per ounce. The report called it a success. The taxpayers called it what it was: the most expensive arts and crafts project in history. 34. $3 million to study how humans walk while texting. A university received a multi-million-dollar grant to analyze the kinetic consequences of mobile device usage during locomotion. Translation: watching people text and walk into stuff. Researchers built an entire mock city street inside a lab to track collisions between distracted pedestrians and obstacles like trash cans, lampposts, and each other. After 18 months, the conclusion was shocking. People who text while walking are clumsy. One participant walked straight into a fake mailbox, which the report described as a valuable data point. Meanwhile, anyone with eyes and a sidewalk could have delivered the same result for free. 35. $900,000 to develop a smart underwear system for soldiers. Yes, this happened. The U.S. Army funded research into undergarments capable of monitoring soldier fatigue and stress. The prototype used sensors sewn into boxer briefs to track heart rate and perspiration levels. Unfortunately, the system was overly sensitive. One test subject sneezed, and the device called in a medevac. Maintenance costs were absurd, and privacy concerns were worse. It turns out soldiers don't love the idea of their underwear sending data to headquarters. The program was quietly discontinued, but the phrase "classified laundry" will live forever. 36. $1.1 million to prove that drunk people think they're attractive. The National Institutes of Health decided to investigate self-perceived attractiveness under intoxication. Researchers took volunteers to a lab bar, gave them free drinks, and asked them to rate their own charm. Unsurprisingly, the drunker they got, the hotter they thought they were. The media dubbed it the beer goggles study. Participants described themselves as more confident and radiant, which scientists defined as delusional. So, in short, we spent $1 million to prove what every bartender in America already knew: confidence rises as coherence plummets. 37. $2.6 million to create a self-driving ice cream truck. A tech-forward city received funding to revolutionize childhood nostalgia by designing an autonomous ice cream truck. The prototype could drive, play music, and dispense popsicles, but couldn't tell the difference between a curb and a toddler. It failed its safety tests spectacularly, once reversing into a playground bench while blaring, "Pop Goes the Weasel." The city declared the experiment an inspiring step toward innovation. Everyone else declared it the first dessert-based public hazard. It was scrapped after one summer, though not before costing taxpayers more than the entire town's annual school budget. 38. $400,000 to study the impact of karaoke on personal confidence. Researchers in Nevada received a grant to examine whether karaoke improves self-esteem. They rented out bars, bought karaoke machines, and paid people to sing. Results? Singing loudly in public made people feel good. The real discovery was that scientists will do anything for a grant that includes free drinks. The report concluded that communal singing fosters emotional bonding. Translation: alcohol and 80s hits make people temporarily forget they have day jobs. Somewhere, Bon Jovi is still collecting royalties off your taxes. 39. $2.3 million to create edible water bottles. A sustainability startup partnered with the government to eliminate plastic waste by making edible water pods, little gel spheres you could bite instead of drink. In theory, brilliant. In practice, horrifying. They melted in heat, stuck to hands, and were described by testers as sweaty grapes filled with sadness. One senator called it a noble disaster. The company still went bankrupt, leaving behind only one important lesson: Sometimes it's okay for packaging not to be digestible. 40. $5 million to build a bridge for crabs. Australia got in on the absurdity too, with government funding for a crab migration bridge. Each year, thousands of red crabs cross roads to reach the ocean, and instead of simple barriers, officials built a massive overhead highway exclusively for crustaceans. It included ramps, fences, and dedicated crab traffic lights. The project cost $5 million, for what locals now call Shellfish Expressway. The crabs, of course, ignored it completely and kept crossing the road the old-fashioned way. Somewhere, a government engineer stood there, watching crabs scuttle underneath the bridge, whispering they were supposed to use the bridge. 41. $1.6 million to study the psychology of karaoke for mice. Because apparently the human version wasn't enough. Scientists in Japan, partly funded by US collaboration grants, decided to see if mice sing better when drunk. They exposed rodents to alcohol vapor and played snippets of pop songs to measure vocal enthusiasm. The result? Drunk mice squeaked off key. The study concluded that alcohol reduces inhibition but not accuracy, which is a polite way of saying mice have the same problem as every office worker on Friday night. The lead researcher proudly stated, "This may explain human behavior." Somewhere, a taxpayer quietly poured a drink and whispered, "Yeah, no kidding." 42. $3.4 million for a climate-resilient margarita. In 2020, a grant aimed to protect national beverage traditions from climate change. Translation: make margaritas sustainable. Scientists spent years studying the tequila supply chain, lime shortages, and salt crystal stability. They even held tasting symposiums in Cancun. For research, of course. The conclusion? Tequila plants don't like droughts, and people still like drinking. The final report suggested adapting the recipe with more sustainable ingredients, like cactus juice and seaweed salt. Humanity rejected it instantly. The margarita remains unchanged, as it should be. 43. $1.2 million to see. If dogs understand accents, the Department of Agriculture decided dogs might process human speech differently based on regional accents. Researchers from Boston, Texas, and Alabama recorded the same commands: sit, stay, fetch, and played them for hundreds of dogs. The finding? Dogs don't care. They obey the treats, not the accent. The study ended with an exhausted scientist noting food was the dominant motivational factor. So basically, we spent over $1 million to confirm that dogs are not linguists, just snack enthusiasts. 44. $900,000 for a study on why coffee spills. Engineers at a California university received nearly $1 million to study the fluid dynamics of coffee transport. In layman's terms, they wanted to know why people spill coffee while walking. The final 36-page paper concluded that coffee sloshes due to oscillatory motion between steps. Translation: because you're moving. The study even recommended holding cups closer to the chest to prevent spillage, a revolutionary insight to anyone who's ever carried a drink. Somewhere, a janitor holding a mop just nodded like, "You could have asked me." 45. $2.1 million to study the influence of jazz on shrimp. Remember the treadmill shrimp? They got an encore. A marine biology project explored whether background jazz music influenced shrimp metabolism. Speakers were placed underwater, playing Miles Davis and Duke Ellington. The results were smooth. The shrimp showed slightly elevated movement, which researchers described as mild rhythmic behavior. The lead scientist called it aquatic groove potential. The rest of the world called it shrimp jazzercise. And yes, they made a playlist called Shell Out Rhythm, funded by your taxes. 46. $1.5 million to test. VR meditation for cows. In 2022, Russian and US agricultural researchers collaborated on a VR experiment to reduce cow stress. They fitted cows with virtual reality headsets showing peaceful green meadows. It worked for about 3 minutes, until one cow stepped in a trough and short-circuited her goggles. The project's conclusion? Cows appear calmer when not aware they're wearing equipment, which, ironically, describes most taxpayers. The headsets now sit in a museum exhibit titled Tech Gone Too Far, an unintentional masterpiece of honesty. 47. $4.6 million to develop emotionally intelligent toilets. A government-funded health tech program wanted to create toilets that monitor stress, hydration, and diet through smart waste analysis. The toilets could even play soothing sounds, depending on mood. Test subjects were uncomfortable. The devices occasionally misinterpreted silence as sadness and played "Don't worry, be happy." The study's conclusion: user receptivity remains low. Translation: people don't want judgmental toilets. The machines were quietly retired, proving some things just shouldn't be automated, especially empathy from your bathroom. 48. $7.3 million for a Space Pen 2.0. That already existed. In a cosmic encore of bureaucratic déjà vu, NASA poured millions into designing a next-generation zero-gravity pen that could write in extreme conditions. After years of testing ink viscosity, pressure chambers, and titanium casings, a contractor finally pointed out that the Fisher Space Pen, invented in the 1960s, already did all of that. It was literally available at office supply stores for $2.49. The official explanation? This project expanded our understanding of existing solutions. In other words, they paid millions to rediscover staples. Humanity, zero bureaucracy, undefeated. Your tax dollars have funded shrimp jazz, psychic cows, and emotionally fragile toilets. So yeah, next time they say government efficiency, just remember, the shrimp are still running on treadmills. Which one deserves a refund first? You decide below.